Christine Baze, a young woman in her 30s who thought she was doing all the right things, but still developed cervical cancer.
What if one day you're walking on it?
It's hard as a musician. There are so many talented people out there, and whether or not you get heard, it's really based on luck and timing and, how much hard work you're willing to put into it. Once I started taking lessons at 4, I just never stopped. And whenever I had downtime, whenever I was after school, my mom would just find me at the piano. If I came home and I was pounding out Rachmaninoff, my mom knew exactly what was going on in my head. I could always be the freak behind the piano. So when I thought about what I wanted to do for a living, I said, I can't do music as a living. I would need to do something to help people and help people find the strength in themselves. So I decided to be a therapist. While I was in quantitative research methods too, I just found myself drifting in my head and saying, instead of spending 3 hours looking at these numbers, I'd really rather be writing a song. I'd really rather be out there singing. I'd rather be a rock star. So that's really the moment when I said, okay, I'm gonna make this a part of my life. Within weeks of making that decision, my body first told me there was something wrong. Every year I went in for my PAP, and every year it was good. Never had any issues. So when I went in 2000, talked about snowboarding and music and everything with my doc, and he's cool. And it was about like 2 weeks later that I got the call saying, hey, Christine, your PAP came back abnormal. We'd like to have you back for a colposcopy. I wasn't that weirded out until I went in and I saw the look on my doctor's face. And he said, oh, Christine, I'm so sorry to have you back so soon. And I was like, dude, it's all right. I know this happens. And he's like, well, actually, I'm afraid that we see some cell changes on your cervix. We see some dysplasia. And if these cells continue to change, then the dysplasia will get worse, and that could eventually cause some problems. So what we want to do is take little snippets of this here and there, and we're going to look at it under a microscope. We're going to do these biopsies. And then I'll have you back in a week, and we'll go through the results and see whether or not you need to freeze off these bad cells or cut them off with what we call a LEAP procedure, or cut a little deeper with a cone biopsy. He's throwing all these things at me, and I'm going, could you tell me again where my cervix is? My husband and I, we talked about it briefly, and then we didn't talk about it again. It's like how they say the pink elephant in the room? And for that week, we just didn't talk about it.
No plans or past to follow.
The phone rang at 8:15, and she eventually said, I'm so sorry, Christine, and I'm calling from the North Shore Cancer Center. What do you do with that?
With my yellow umbrella, yeah.
Every year of my life, I had a normal PAP. It's not how it's supposed to happen. It was squamous cell cervical cancer. He told me I was diagnosed with invasive squamous cell cervical cancer, and that there was a potential for extensive lymphatic involvement, and that I was going to need to have a hysterectomy immediately. At 31, hearing that news, that was really brutal for me and for my husband. All I knew was I had cancer, and so all I could think of was cancer equals death. That's what it is in my world. Anybody I've ever known to that point had died from cancer. And I didn't know anything about cervical cancer other than it took a long time to grow, and that for some reason it didn't get caught, in me, so that means it had been there for a long time. I was diagnosed on April 18th of 2000. 10 days later, on April 28th, I had a radical hysterectomy, and they removed the top third of my vagina, my cervix, my uterus, fallopian tubes, the connective tissue in my pelvic area, and all the pelvic lymph nodes in that area. They took it all. They took everything.
Oh, please.
2 weeks ago, I was being interviewed by Boston Magazine, and they were saying that I was the next big thing to come out of Boston, and now it's 2 weeks later, and I can't breathe, and I feel like I want to rip off my skin. I can't stand up straight. I'm carrying around a bag of pee. What is going on with my life? feel like going for your pap test is just so invasive, you know, that it's just so degrading as a woman. And I say, you know, there's nothing more invasive than internal radiation, where they're inserting a giant metal cylinder into you and for 10 minutes at a time zapping you with the best they got. That's invasive. Having your body parts removed from you, that is invasive. Poisoning your body, that's invasive. Going and getting a pap test, getting an HPV test, that's gonna save your life, you know? That's gonna prevent you from doing these things. I am one of the lucky ones. Over 3,000 will lose their lives this year to it. And I didn't lose my life. And I'm so, so grateful for that. And it all starts with a woman talking to another woman. It starts with me talking to you know, and saying, hey, this is what I've learned. I'm gonna do it one song at a time. Just gonna keep doing it. And hopefully people will like it along the way.